Here's a quote from one of my favorite authors about nurses. This stamp was issued in 1961, the year I began collecting stamps, to honor the nursing profession. The design features a young nurse lighting the traditional candle upon completion of her training to signify her dedication to the profession. In 1798, New York Hospital attending surgeon Dr. Valentine Seaman recognized the need for a specially trained group of women to assist the doctors at his hospital. As a result, he began one of America's first nurse training programs. Here's a typical first day of issue cover by Fleetwood in the 1960s. Typical of the first day covers of the day with a monochromatic cachet honoring the nursing profession. A first day of issue cover by Flugel covers with a slightly more colorful cachet. Flugel covers are harder to find and command higher prices from collectors. Another cover featuring the 1961 nursing stamp, along with a Norman Rockwell painting from the Saturday Evening Post. The word nurse is derived from a Latin word meaning to nourish or to cherish, establishing a close relationship between the roles of mothering and nursing. This relationship must have struck a chord in Norman Rockwell's memories because more than once he depicted a motherly woman administering some sort of tonic to a reluctant boy. Florence Nightingale founded the first modern school of nursing in 1860 in London, England. Nightingale came to prominence while serving as a manager and trainer of nurses during the Crimean War, in which she organized care for wounded soldiers at Constantinople. At the outbreak of the Civil War, Clara Barton was one of the first volunteers to provide nursing care for the Union wounded. After the First Battle of Bull Run in July 1861, she began advertising in newspapers for medical supplies and received such enormous quantities that she soon established her own distribution center. A familiar figure in Union camps and field hospitals, she soon earned the title the Angel of the Battlefield. On one occasion, she narrowly avoided a bullet that tore through her dress, though it killed the man she was caring for. This portrait is by Matthew Brady, probably the best-known photographer of the Civil War era. After the war, Barton traveled the country giving lectures on her wartime experiences. By 1868, she was exhausted and given doctor's orders to take a trip to relax. Barton decided to go to Europe, where she'd find a new calling. In 1869, Barton visited Geneva, Switzerland, and learned about the International Red Cross and its founders' interest in forming similar relief societies around the world. This stamp issue was the first to be printed in two colors using the rotary press. Early on, the members of the Red Cross realized that while each nation was responsible for the health and well-being of its own people, there should also be official agencies ensuring the proper treatment of all people, especially during times of war. To this end, they agreed on the need for a set of rules for all to follow during such conflicts. The end result was the First Geneva Convention. This stamp honors the 100th anniversary of the International Red Cross and its contribution to the Cuban prisoner exchange. This stamp is based on a photograph of the freighter SS Morning Light, which is one of the Mercy ships that returned refugees from Cuba at Port Everglades, Florida on May the 24th, 1963. On May the 21st, 1881, Barton held the first meeting of the American Red Cross at her home in Washington, D.C. The American Red Cross had its first opportunity to provide major relief in September 1881 when a massive fire left 5,000 people in Michigan homeless. This issue from 1931 commemorates the 50th anniversary of the founding of the American Red Cross. Today, there are more than 650 Red Cross chapters in the United States alone, staffed by some 500,000 volunteers. On average, they provide aid for over 67,000 disasters each year. Oddly enough, there was not a stamp issued for the 100th anniversary of the American Red Cross. The next opportunity would be 10 years from now in 2031 for the 150th anniversary. Mary Walker tried to join the Union Army when the Civil War began, but was denied a commission, so she volunteered as a surgeon. At the time, the Army didn't allow female surgeons, so she was admitted as a nurse, but eventually became an acting assistant surgeon, becoming the first female surgeon in the U.S. Army. For 2 years, Walker served at the front lines in numerous battles. In 1863, she was appointed assistant surgeon in the Army of the Cumberland and eventually the 52nd Ohio Infantry. By 1850, Walt Whitman was unhappy with the work he was doing and resolved to become a professional poet. He spent the next 5 years writing a collection of poetry he envisioned as an American epic. Then, in 1855, he published the book, Leaves of Grass, at his own expense. At the start of the Civil War, Whitman printed his poem, Beat, Beat, Drums, to rally the North. After one of his brothers joined the Union Army, Whitman feared he had died in battle and set out to find him. Though he found him alive, he was shocked at the battle injuries he'd seen along the way and wanted to join the Union cause. He traveled to Washington, D.C. and got a job in the Army Paymaster's office and began working as a volunteer nurse in the Army hospitals. Whitman detailed his experiences for a New York newspaper. Phoebe Yates-Pember was a young widow who, unhappy with the inactivity of civilian life, accepted the position of chief matron of the 2nd Division. Like many other Civil War nurses, Pember faced numerous professional barriers and regularly endured insults from those who believed that no respectable woman should minister to the needs of wounded men. Highly competent and strong-minded, she continued to care for them despite these objections. Better known for founding the Underground Railroad and helping over 300 slaves to freedom, Harriet Tubman worked as a nurse for liberated slaves in refugee camps at the beginning of the Civil War. Tubman served as a nurse in Port Royal, South Carolina, preparing remedies from local plants and aiding soldiers suffering from dysentery. She rendered assistance to men with smallpox. That she did not contract the disease herself started more rumors that she was blessed by God. At first, she received government rations for her work, but newly freed blacks thought she was getting special treatment. To ease the tension, she gave up her right to these supplies and made money selling pies and root beer, which she made in the evenings. In January 1849, Elizabeth Blackwell became the first woman in America to graduate from medical school. Blackwell knew that sanitary conditions were important, especially in times of war. In 1861, she helped to establish the U.S. Sanitary Commission. Also, during the Civil War, Blackwell and her sister Emily helped train nurses for the battlefields. When the Spanish-American War broke out, Clara Moss volunteered to serve as a nurse with the U.S. Army. In the late 1800s, she served with the 7th U.S. Army Corps in Florida, Georgia, and Cuba. After being discharged, she volunteered again with the 8th U.S. Army Corps in the Philippines. During her service, Moss didn't tend to many battle injuries. Most of her time was spent aiding soldiers suffering from diseases such as typhoid, malaria, dengue, and yellow fever. Moss was among the volunteers who allowed themselves to be bitten by infected mosquitoes, even though they were aware it was life-threatening. Many of the volunteers died, but she recovered. To try to establish that she had built up immunity from her earlier exposure, Moss allowed herself to be infected again in 1901. This time, she died from the disease on August the 24th, 1901, at the age of 25. Moss's death drew attention to experiments on humans, and the practices was soon ended. But her contributions helped build upon earlier studies, and the outbreaks of yellow fever were reduced. Emily Bissell was the secretary of the Delaware Red Cross and was an active member of the American Lung Association. Bissell's cousin, Dr. Joseph Wales, served at a Delaware tuberculosis sanitarium that was in danger of closing due to financial hardship. They needed to raise $300 or they would have to close their doors. Bissell had read about Denmark's Christmas seals and decided to introduce the idea in the United States. Bissell designed the first U.S. Christmas seals and arranged for them to be printed on credit. The 1-cent seals first went on sale at a Delaware post offices on December the 7th, 1907. The seals raised $25 on the first day, but sales quickly slowed down. Bissell then contacted a Philadelphia newspaper, the North American, which began selling the seals in their lobby. They ran daily articles under the heading, "Stamp Out Tuberculosis." Soon, President Theodore Roosevelt learned of the campaign and offered his support, further bringing attention to it. By the end of the year, Christmas seals had raised $3,000, 10 times the amount of money needed to save the sanitarium. Based on the overwhelming response of that first year's sales, Christmas seals were sold on a national level the following year. In 1908, the U.S. printed millions of seals that raised $135,000. These funds were used to provide aid to more sanitariums and to fight tuberculosis. The Red Cross continued to oversee the Christmas Seals program until 1920, when the National Tuberculosis Association took over. The NTA transformed Christmas Seals into the largest nonprofit direct mail campaign in the United States. Mary Breckinridge founded the Kentucky Committee for Mothers and Babies in 1925, which later became known as the Frontier Nursing Service. It was the first such service in the United States to employ nurses that were certified midwives. Breckinridge's father, as well as 2 midwives she met in London, Kentucky, joined the operation, which delivered its first baby in September 1925. Breckinridge's nurses would travel by horse anytime, day or night, to deliver babies. During the Frontier Nursing Service's first 30 years in operation, it had better statistics than the national average in terms of maternal mortality rates and low baby birth weights. By 1959, the service had assisted in over 10,000 births. I'm surprised that there has not been a stamp recognizing the DAISY Award for nurses, an acronym for diseases attacking the immune system. The DAISY Foundation was formed in November 1999 by the family of J. Patrick Barnes, who died at age 33 of complications of a disease now known as ITP. The nursing care Patrick received when hospitalized profoundly touched his family. Today, the DAISY Award is recognized globally as the highest honor in nursing. 3 years ago, after my cardio rehab program at Floyd Memorial Hospital, I nominated and awarded all of the nurses with my own version of the DAISY Award, a 16-inch by 20-inch metal print of this photograph I took years ago on my street. As far as I know, it is still in the rehab facility at the hospital. Thank you for watching this presentation. I will always be grateful to the loving care of all the nurses.